Welcome to Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Greidick. I'm Dr. Martha Greidick. This podcast examines a wide variety of work-related issues through the lens of industrial and organizational psychology. And while many of the topics discussed here may be seen as intended for white-collar employees and their employers, in reality, the ideas presented here are applicable across organizations and industries. Additionally, many of the topics discussed here may be applicable outside of the workplace. I encourage you to examine what's presented here, apply what makes sense to you, and simply discard the rest. Mistakes happen. They're inevitable, whether that's mistakes at work or outside of the office. But how you deal with mistakes, how you react to them or respond to them, and what you learn from them, or maybe don't learn from them, can make all the difference in the world. And of course, some mistakes are bigger than others. But the bottom line is this, that regardless of whether or not you're the one who made a mistake, or you're the one who's on the receiving end of its effects, there are some simple practices, some do's and don'ts that can make things better, that can make it easier to deal with the mistakes than making it worse, which is often what happens when people react to mistakes that happen, whether it's their own mistakes or the mistakes of others. Once a mistake has been discovered, you want to assess the situation first. You want to see, how big is this mistake? What exactly was the mistake? You may want to see whether or not some damage control is required. And that can be internal or external. Some mistakes will affect only those within the organization, whereas other mistakes may affect thousands or even millions of people, maybe your customers, maybe society at large. So you want to see what kind of damage control you may need to do if that is indeed the case. In other words, can the mistake be corrected, maybe right away or in a very short time after it happened or after it's been discovered? Once those preliminary things are taken care of, where we have a hold of what's going on and stop the proverbial bleeding, you want to take a look at the mistake as a whole and see what can be learned from it. Every single mistake, big or small, is a learning opportunity. And if you come across a mistake that you don't think has a learning potential in there somewhere, maybe it's just well hidden, maybe you're just not looking hard enough, and maybe it's time to put your head together with someone else or ask someone else for their input to identify a learning opportunity, because truly every single mistake is an opportunity, at the very least, of what not to do again. Which brings me to the third thing to consider, is figuring out how not to make the same mistake or a similar mistake. It doesn't have to be limited just to that very exact thing that happened or that very exact mistake. There are things that are similar enough that could also be potentially prevented by making the current mistake or the mistake at hand a learning opportunity. Besides these three considerations, there are also three other things to keep in mind as you're dealing with mistakes at the workplace. First and foremost, keep your emotions in check and mind your behavior. It's easy to get caught up in emotions when mistakes happen, whether that's being angry at yourself for making a mistake or being angry at someone else who made a mistake. It's critical that you keep your emotions in check and control your behaviors, mind your behaviors. Reacting to a mistake does not give anybody the permission to conduct themselves inappropriately, to behave poorly. poorly. So make sure you're paying attention to your emotions and that you are monitoring your behaviors so that you don't get out of control, which can only make things worse. Being reactive can only add to the problem, and that's the last thing we need when we're dealing with a mistake and when we're trying to deal with it in a productive way. Along the same lines, it's important to choose your words carefully. Think before you speak. When we speak, our words truly make an impact on those around us and even on ourselves. So be very, very careful in terms of what you say and how you say it. The right words can make all the difference and can take the situation in the right direction to make things better in general. But the wrong words or words said in the wrong way can truly make things worse. So just as your emotions and your behaviors can play a big role in how and in what direction this thing goes after a mistake has been made, so too can your words make a big difference for the better or for the worse. So really pay attention to your words. And sometimes the old saying of, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all, can really come into play here. Because if you find yourself emotionally charged and ready to just chew someone out, it may be a better choice to walk away and say nothing now. Sleep on it, give it 24 hours, wait until you've calmed down, because your words can only make things worse. And the third thing here is to show compassion. This truly is an opportunity to show compassion towards others and towards yourself if you're the one who either made the mistake or who's on the receiving end of the effects that are associated with the mistake. Truly, this is an opportunity to show compassion towards others and yourself, just as it is an opportunity if you don't think, or if you make that a conscious choice, to make things worse by being nasty and overly emotional and out of control. It is a better opportunity to choose compassion instead. Remember, we're all human beings. We all make mistakes. And when you're looking at a workplace and a work environment, everybody there comes together for a purpose, for a mission, for a reason. So what better place to choose compassion when you're in a group of people who are there for the same purpose and who rely on one another to get things done. And of course, there are some things that you definitely don't want to do when it comes to dealing with mistakes. First and foremost, don't allow yourself to be emotional. It can only make things worse. So again, keep your emotions in check. Don't let your emotions get away from you. Don't be quick to point fingers or play the blame game. And that's equally important when it comes to a mistake that was made by someone else or a mistake that was made by you. Even if you're the one who made the mistake, don't be so quick to point fingers and assign blame. Make sure you lay off of that. That's a definitely don't on the list of the do's and don'ts when dealing with mistakes at work. And of course, don't let nasty words into the situation. If you can't be civil, if you can't say something supportive or at the very least neutral, then keep your mouth shut. If you can't have the right tone of voice, then say nothing. It really is that simple. It may not always be easy, but it really is that simple. So the bottom line for all of this, what it all comes down to is this. First, act like a grown-up who is in control of himself or herself. And the second thing is to learn from your mistakes, because if you've learned nothing from a mistake, then that was a wasted opportunity and you are likely to be in that situation again. As this episode comes to an end, let's review what was discussed. We all know that mistakes happen, but what you do after the mistake has been made or has been discovered can make all the difference in the world. First and foremost, assess the situation. What's the damage? What kind of damage control do you need to possibly do? Is it internal? Is it external? Those are the kinds of things you need to assess when you first discover the mistake or when it's first made. And of course, once you make that assessment, you have to decide if the mistake can be corrected right there and then or shortly in the future. You have to figure out what can be learned from the mistake and how to prevent this kind of mistake or a similar kind of mistake in the future. You absolutely have to focus on those three things. Today's episode also included 3 other things to remember. First and foremost, control your emotions. That means no emotional outbursts, no over emotional behaviors, and that also means keeping a check on your behaviors. Mind what you say and how you say it. And lastly, take the opportunity to show compassion towards yourself and towards others. And of course, there are some don'ts when it comes to dealing with mistakes. Don't get overly emotional and make sure you keep your behaviors in check. Don't point fingers or blame others, and that goes for yourself as well. Blaming yourself is not healthy either. It's more about learning and resolution and prevention for the future. That's much more productive. As the week unfolds, I invite you to think of the last time that a mistake was part of your experience at the workplace, whether it was a mistake you made or somebody else made and you were on the receiving end of its effects. How well did you handle it? And where could you have improved how things went once that mistake was discovered? Take what you've learned here today and apply it to your own experiences in such a way that it makes them more productive and easier to handle in the future. Because just as the sun comes up every morning, so too you can guarantee that mistakes will happen sooner or later. Despite our best efforts, despite all of our preventions, at some point a mistake will happen, and you have so much power in how things go afterwards. It would be a shame for you not to learn how to improve your ways of handling mistakes, especially at the workplace. For those of you who experience this podcast in an audio-only version, I invite you to check out my YouTube channel, Stress Free with Dr. G. In addition to the video version of the podcast, you can find videos that focus on stress management right on my YouTube channel. So I invite you to check it out. The link for that is in the description below. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to this podcast. I look forward to seeing you here again next time. Until then, I wish you joy and well-being.